I suggest that we will start because we will have a quite full hour, I think, in our first Speaking from the Margins lecture. So this is the inaugural lecture of our Speaking from the Margins DBBE online lecture series for this season. And we are extremely happy to welcome Andreas Rhoby for this opening lecture. My name is Floris Bernard. I am assistant professor of ancient Greek and Byzantine literature at Ghent University. So I am calling you from snowy Belgium at this time, and I'm extremely happy to see all of you, familiar faces and new faces, friends of the DBBE. This lecture is organized by our database of Byzantine book epigrams project based at Ghent University. I'm assuming that many of us already know about our project. We are already around for quite some time, actually. Actually, it was already inaugurated or started, let's say, some 12 years ago. And in the meantime, I think it developed into an impressive database, thanks to the collaboration of many people, many of whom I'm also welcoming here. At the moment, we are being funded by the Research Council of Ghent University by their concerted research action scheme. And we have actually also secured last year funding for the next few years. So at this moment, we have just started actually this new project phase under the direction of Professor Christoffel de Moon. You will know our database. We are collecting and compiling into an online and open access database all of the book epigrams that we are finding in Byzantine manuscripts. Book epigrams being or metrical paratexts, so metrical colophons, dedicatory epigrams, metrical titles, laudatory epigrams for authors, all the kinds of marginal poetry that you find dispersed in Byzantine manuscripts. And that was actually, up until recently, very difficult to find because it was so dispersed over many different sources. It is still fascinating material. I'm assuming that all of you had at least a walk through our database. We are still very much interested by the fact how these little texts, or sometimes also bigger texts, how they find themselves exactly at the threshold, so to say, between the materiality of the Byzantine manuscripts and, let's say, the more spiritual or intellectual significance of the texts contained in that manuscript. They are living testimonies to Byzantine book culture and also to the, let's say, the history of reading in the Byzantine Empire. And at the same time, they also constitute a very living vein of Byzantine poetic production. Additionally, they hold so much interest because these are texts that we find in their original context in which they have been produced. So many reasons to collect these texts, many reasons to study these texts, and that is why in June 2020 we were intending to organize a conference called Growing Corpora that had a twofold intention. On the one hand, to, let's say, to reach out to other projects that are dealing with similar textual corpora and to exchange knowledge and skills about technologies. On the other hand, to invite people to elucidate the genre of book epigrams. That was planned for June 2020, and all of us know what happens in between. So we had to cancel this conference. The first, let's say, goal of the project is let's say, recuperated into a social media project called Sister Projects, where we invite affiliated projects to contribute to our social media posts. And the second part, we are trying to more or less compensate for that through this online lecture series, the first of which is today. So 6 people in this semester from today until the end of June will elucidate various aspects of Byzantine book epigrams. 6 people, some of them, let's say, people from in-house, from the DBE project itself, other people from elsewhere, and we're very happy to announce that each of them will really shed light on a different aspect: art historic, literary history, linguistics as well. Today is the first is the inaugural lecture of that series, and we are very happy that we found Andreas Rhoby to be prepared to give that lecture. I don't think that I really need to introduce Andreas Rhoby to all of you. You know that Andreas Rhoby has been working at the is working at the Österreichische Akademie der Wissenschaften in Vienna. He's also a member or a pupil, if I can say so, of the celebrated school of the late Wolfram Heurandner. And this lecture, Andreas' lecture, is also dedicated to the memory of Wolfram Heurandner, who passed away recently. Many of us know Andreas' gigantic work for the project, the Vienna project, that was inaugurated by Wolfram Heurandner on Byzantine inscriptions. And this has resulted in this impressive multi-volume work of Byzantinische Epigramme in schriftliche Überlieferung that provides a compilation, an edition, and also a very in-depth commentary on Byzantine inscriptions, really providing us with a very complete overview and study of inscriptions and also their contexts. Andreas Rhoby has also published on that subject, has organized summer schools on the subject of Byzantine epigraphy. So he is at this moment the giant of the study of Byzantine epigrams. But he has done much more work, also in recent, just recent years, to just mention that he has, for example, edited the new Brill Companion on Byzantine poetry, and he has also made a German translation of the 12th century poet Constantine Manassis of his verse chronicle, amongst many other projects and publications. So I will be very happy to give him the floor in a minute. Not before I give you perhaps some practical guidelines. We are trying to keep this lecture series as let's say convivial as possible. So to avoid the fact that Andreas would have to would be obliged to talk to an empty screen, which is not so pleasant experience that many of us know who have been teaching during Corona times. You are invited to leave your camera on, so that we can see live human interaction somehow on the screen as well. But you're not at all obliged to do so. For your questions and answers, I also proposing that you will be doing this live, so that you can, if you go to the chat, there is a function there to raise your hands. And let's say that when you raise your hand, I can, just as we would do at the normal conference, call your name, and you will be given the floor to ask a question to Andreas. If that does not work for any reason, you can of course also use the chat function, but we will be not using the chat function during the lecture of Andreas. So this is more or less the guidelines that we will be following during these lectures, in the hope that everything will be as close as possible to a live interaction, which all of us are, of course, much missing at this time. I think that was all for the introduction. You are all waiting with trepidation to hear Andreas talk about the subject of verse and image, the Kosmos of Byzantine metrical paratexts. Andreas, it's with much pleasure that I give you the floor.
Yeah, Floris, thank you very much for this kind introduction. And hello to everybody. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. Yeah, and I have to say it's a great honor for me to open this lecture series, and I'm also very happy to present some insights into my previous work on epigrams. I will now start my presentation. Just give me a few seconds. I hope you can see it. Yeah. Yes, the title of my presentation is Verse and Image, the Cosmos of Byzantine Metrical Paratexts. And as Floris has already stated, I dedicate this lecture to the memory of Wolfram Herentner, my teacher, my supervisor, and my friend who unfortunately passed away on January 27. Wolfram and his contributions on Byzantine poetry, especially epigrams, paved the way for further studies in this field. And I owe him very much, and I think the entire scholarly community owes him very much. Byzantine studies lost not only a very brilliant scholar, but also an always friendly, modest, and helpful person who we will remember forever. My lecture with the title Verse and Image, the Cosmos of Byzantine Metrical Paratexts is not only based on Wolfram's preparatory studies and my studies on Byzantine epigrams. It's especially based on the material which is presented in the database of Byzantine book epigrams, and with regards to the concept of Kosmos, it's of course also based on Ivan Trippich's brilliant monograph about with the title Epigram, Art and Devotion, later Byzantium, which was published in 2016, and especially the chapter 3 of his book, which is dedicated to the concept of Kosmos, adornment. The concept of Kosmos is of course manifold, because Kosmos basically has two meanings. On the one hand, it's world, and the other adornment, and there are some epigrams which really play with these two meanings. So in this talk, I would like to address three topics. First, the concept of Kosmos in Byzantine metrical paratexts, both in manuscripts, book epigrams as we call them, and on objects, inscriptional epigrams, which is basically my corpus on which I have worked for many, many years. I will also address the question about the concept of paratexts, and I will also stress the interaction between metrical paratexts in manuscripts and inscriptional epigrams on objects. Let me just remind you of the definition of Byzantine metrical paratexts in manuscripts, book epigrams, which is to be found on the website of the database. There it says, we define book epigrams as poems in and on books. They have a subject, the very manuscript in which they are found, elaborating on its production, contents, and use. And the first image I'm showing you is folio 4 verso of the Sinaiticus Graecus 500, which is a metaphrastic monologion for the month of November and dates to the third quarter of the 11th century. And we can see here the depiction of a cross. The cross is set in a linear frame and flanked by two trees, and the tetragram Jesus Christos, in this case without Nika. And on the arms of the cross, framed by ornamental borders and written in gold ink, and it's very clearly to be seen here in so-called Auszeichnungsmajuskel, so in epigraphische Auszeichnungsmajuskel, so in epigraphic distinct majuscle, which imitates the script of inscriptions, of monumental inscriptions. This image fulfills all requirements of the concept of Kosmos. And the verse also mentions this, it mentions Kosmos. And it says, Kosmos beficat disparusis pixias. I am adornment of the present book. As I said, this cross is to be found at the very beginning, almost at the very beginning of this manuscript. And it has various meanings, or it can be seen in different ways. First, it is of course adornment. It is adornment at the beginning of the book. But on the other side, we all know that crosses, depicted crosses, have much more meaning. They protect the cross. So the cross is kind of the guardian of the book. And they crosses, depiction of crosses, and there is no question where they are situated. We find them also on city walls. We find them on other portable objects and icons and so on. They have some kind of apotropaic power. So protective, apotropaic, and adornment. So this depiction, this illumination fulfills various purposes. Occasionally, these depiction of crosses are found at the beginning of books, but we find them also at the end of the book. And this is just a random example. It's the Parasinus Graecus 1129. It dates to the year 1353, and the text is on folio 218 recto, so this is almost the end of the book. Actually, what we see here, it's a text which is shaped in the form of a cross. There are many more examples, so this is just one example I'm showing you. This text, this codex contains the famous Vita of Barlaam and Joasaph. And this is the very end, so the end of the cross is the very end of the epilogue of this Vita. And after this epilogue, you can see here, it's followed by Amen. Yeah, this cross has two bars. So it's decorative. It's at the end of the book, and it has again this protective apotropaic meaning. There are 3 book epigrams which are written on both sides of the cross. The first one, the To Syntelestiton Kalon Theocharis, is a very common book epigram. We find, if you look in the database, you will find many, many attestations. In translation, it reads, "Thanks to be God who accomplishes good things." The second one, it's a scribe-related epigram, Joasaph, save me, Joasaph. So, interestingly enough, the scribe is called Joasaph, and he asks, let's say, the hero of this Vita, so one of the heroes of this Vita, let me say so, to save him. And the third one, the third epigram, explicitly refers to the depiction of the cross. It says, Stavros pepithos dermatisot in velo. So it's a verse by the scribe who says, trusting in a cross, I end the book. So you have some more, there's the cross, you have some more decorative elements, like here and the spars over there. And also the position of the verse, if you look carefully at it, so there's always the cross divides the verse, and it's always at the so-called Binnenschluss. So this is the very intentional placement of the parts of the verses. the Stavrope Pithostematiso Vivlon is also kind of a standard book epigram, although we have only two more examples preserved. The one is from the Codex Marcianus Graecus 181 from the 11th century, and the other one is from Codex Ambrosianus A74, 73, 11th, 12th century. Again, you can see here these book epigrams, always with reference to the cross. Yeah, I would just say a few words about this, let's say this scribe-related epigram. It's a metrical, it's not only an address to the hero of the book to save him. It's also kind of a signature, a metrical signature of the scribe. Occasionally we find these metrical signatures of painters, for example, in fresco painting, but these are really very rare attestations. So it's much more found in manuscripts. However, the next picture testifies to the interaction between script in manuscripts and on objects. And when you look at these walls, it's from a neighboring culture of Byzantium. It's from Dongola, the capital of the Nubian Christian of Makuria, today in Sudan, which continued being a Christian society up to the 12th century. And this room is impressive insofar because it's completely covered with inscriptions. And interesting enough, these are not painted inscriptions, but they are written with ink. And one of these texts you can see here is Psalm 127, and at the end, so it's a bilingual inscription. It's both in Greek and Old Nubian, for which also Greek, also sometimes Coptic lectures are used. And at the end of this the psalm, we find sort of a colophon by the scribe, which is really interesting. So there is this very strong interactions between the materials. Also, you can see here the square of Sator, which occasionally we find in Greek manuscripts, but most of the attestations are in Western manuscripts. The role of the image here, and I come back to the concept of Kosmos. So it is Kosmos. Script is Kosmos. Script is adornment, especially in this uniconic setting. There are no depictions of whatever, so the script which adorns the room and also protects the room. You can see with the writings of texts from the Holy Bible, as the Psalm, for example. So we have to keep in mind always this meaning of texts, and it does not matter where it is inscribed. This is also the case of so-called figure poems, and Wolfram Herntner, and I have again to come back to his great work. He published the most important paper on Byzantine figure poems in the Jahrbuch der österreichischen Byzantinistik in the year 1990. This is a further manuscript on which I would like to discuss Kosmos and the concept of Kosmos and the importance of the positioning of texts. This is, the manuscript is from Athens, from the National Library. It dates to the 13th, 14th century, and this ornament with an epigram formed in the shape of a cross marks the beginning of the Acts of the Apostles. And the epigram, which reads in translation, is "Look who writes, knows the initiates of the word. He writes down the deeds for Theophilus." So here it is addressed, it is discussed the idea that Luke is the composer, is the author of the Acts of Apostles. So that the text is again in very distinctive majuscule, and it, again, the cross is not adornment within another set of adornment. It is also, it opens the book, it opens the text, it's guardian of the text, it's protective and apotropaic. I also would like to come, if we come back to the Parisinos, and I would like to address once more the epigram, the verse Stavropepithos dermatisotem vivlon. This Stavropepithos, which is taken actually from hymnography, so there are attestations in hymnography, is, we find them, this formula also on objects. This is again something which I would like to stress here, namely the interaction between manuscripts and book epigrams and epigrams on objects. And it says in sipe pifos stavre. So unfortunately, of this cross from Modena, from Tesoro del Duomo, I just have this figure taken from Schlumberger in 1900. So unfortunately, I haven't found any recent picture image of this. So the epigram reads in English translation: "Trusting you, cross, guardian of the vault, Pantherius, the poor servant, has created your divine image, which with much yearning." So pathos always appears more or less different meanings. So it's either love, yearning, desire. So this pathos is a very important term with we come across very often in this kind of epigrams. But when you look at this epigram, it could also be a book epigram. Let's say if you exchange son dipon with sin biblon or son delton, although this would create a prosodical problem at the end, this would also be a book epigram. Yeah, so Pantherius, he ordered his cross. He could also be the dedicator of a codex, of a book. So this NC Pepifos Stavre, we find it also interesting enough on a seal. So there's a further kind of object on which this verse, as I say, this formula taken from hymnography, is attested. And there it refers, now, so in C Pepifos, it's not Stavros, also the cross, but on the seal it's Christ who is addressed, Christe. And there is also a further book epigram in the Oxford Codex. There it says in si pepifos trias, so it refers to Trinity. So there are always kind of formulas, very different formulas, which are exchangeable. We find them on various objects. So again, this testifies these close, very close interactions between the verses on various objects. I would like discuss now one term, which is a new term, and you may very much disagree with this term, which I, let's say, created. In my view, the verses which are inscribed on the cross and also on the seal, so on objects, in my view, they are also paratextual, or you can call them para-object texts. What do I mean with that? These objects would also work without these inscriptions. And there are many instances of crosses or any other objects which are not inscribed. These texts, they can work individually. They are not necessarily part of the composition of an object. So it's something which is beyond the objects, beyond a text beyond the objects. And this is what I mean with paratextual inscriptions on objects, or para-object epigrams in this case. But let me now return to the concept of Kosmos. This is an icon of Christ with silver cover. It was in the Church of Svetý Klement in Ohrid, but it's now lost. And this epigram, with which Ivan Tripic has dealt extensively, it uses the term cosmos very often, and it plays with the different meanings of this cosmos. So it reads, the adornment cosmos of your image, O adorner cosmita of the world, cosmos is a gift of Demetrius, the art shepherd of the Bulgars. May you reward me with adornment, Rapheson Kosmon, who am created in your image, by cleansing the misshapen ugliness of my passions. So this is a very clear dedicatory inscriptions. The icon, or the frame of the icon, the cover of the icon, dedicated by the Archbishop of the Bulgarians, Demetrios. Ivan Tripic stated about the verses on this icon cover as follows, quote, two kinds of adornments. So the cosmos represents, quote, two kinds of adornment, one material and the other spiritual, embellishing two kinds of images, one painted by the mortal artist and the other impressed human nature by the divine creator. And this again, precisely the spiritual function of the concept that sets the text apart from the icon and generates a message beyond the object. So again, you can see what I meant with the term which I used before. There are abundant epigrams, book epigrams, which use cosmos or the verb cosmi again. And when you look at here, this Sinaiticon, this Codex Sinaiticus Graecus 206, it's a lectionary which was ordered by Nikephoros Moschopoulos, a metropolitan of Crete and Proitos of Lacedaemon, and it was produced in the year 1303. And in a translation, it reads, this book of the Gospels writes and adorns with this adornment to the best of his ability the unworthy Nikephoros, Proitos of Crete, and consecrates it to the monastery Phocaea, which uses to bear the name of Athanasius, provided that Ismail's sword should cease. Now all of you pray for him forgiveness of sins and salvation of the soul. There is some historical background of this epigram because, as it says here, it was consecrated to the monastery of Phocaea in order to give, to protect the monastery against the enemies, which then were the the Turks in Asia Minor, but historically interesting is also the fact that there are further verses which were attached later, a couple of years later, and they say that these verses say that that the animus word did not stop, as it says, and therefore the patron dedicated the book to the monastery on Mount St. Catherine on Mount Sinai. Yeah. When you look at the text, so is again we have two ornaments, 2 times Kosmos. It's here the circle, very nice decorated circle, and within the circle we have inscribed the text as Kosmos, in the shape of a cross. And again, it has these meanings which I mentioned before: decorative, apotropaic, and protective. This is another example of an epigram attached to an object. It's taken from the Starothiki, kept in the treasury of San Marco in Venice. It's not the original one. The original one dates to the 11th, 12th century, as we can tell from the shape of the inscriptions, which was imitated later on the copy of the 16th century. And in translation, it reads, "Cross that the drops of the blood of the Lord, equipped with divine glory and power, how could pearls and gems glorify it? Your adornment, O cross, of faith and love. In this way, also the Empress Maria adorns you." Maria in this case seems to be Maria of Alania, the wife of Michael VII and later Nicephorus Botaniatis, and it's the other interpretation is that it's Maria of Antiochia, the second wife of Manuel I in the 12th century. So Kosmos, the concept of Kosmos is used here differently, because the real cosmos is not the object or this layout, let's say the layout of the Starothiki and this precious layout of the Starothiki and the inscriptions. This is not Kosmos, the real Kosmos. The real Kosmos is faith and love. So it's beyond, something beyond the material cosmos, material concept of cosmos. And this topos is also to be found in manuscripts, in book epigrams or manuscripts. This is taken from the Codex Princeton Chariot 16. Okay, there is a mistake up there, so forget about Cinetus Grecus 2.6. This was a copying mistake. So the epigram reads, "For others, gold is a great gift, and silver and purple are venerable possessions, flowing matter, full of transience. For the worshippers and friend of Christ, however, the greatest gift is the cross alone, and wealth and pride and divine power." So it's the same topos which was used in the epigram on the Starothiki from Venice. There are two further, so you have a cross here, a depiction of a cross, and the epigram, the long epigram is attached, is written on both sides of the cross. O Stavros here is, you see the word is written very distinctively. And we have two further verses down there which explicitly refer to the cross, the protective power of the cross, Stavros monachis kata demonon odori, cross for the monks, a spear against the demons. And the second one is Stavros xyphos Pefike katademon, so very similar, meaning the cross is a sword against the demons. And these verses remind very much of Theodore, the Studite monostica, which refer to the cross. Let me see. Yeah, I'm almost at the end. So yeah, I'm summing up my presentation. I dealt with 3 topics, or it was my idea to deal with 3 topics. I don't know if it was really clear for you. So the first, I wanted again stress the interaction between metrical texts and manuscripts and inscriptional verses and objects. They are exchangeable in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases. The same topoi, the same structure, and there is the vice versa imitation content, and also on script. We have the epigraphische Auszeichnung majuskel, which is used in manuscripts and other distinctive majuscle types, for example, the liturgical majuscle. But we also find script, minuscule script, which is used in manuscripts on objects. And if you recall the depiction of the inscription in the monastery in Dongola, so this is very impressive. I also dealt with the concept of Kosmos. Crosses are not only illumination, which function as adornment, but it is also the text itself, which is adornment on objects and also in manuscripts. And on the other hand, there is the topos that materia and matter is not the real cosmos, but Christ, the divine. And the third concept, and this is perhaps kind of a heretic one, is the concept of paratexts. In my view, they are not only to be found in manuscripts, metrical paratexts, manuscripts, book epigrams, but also metrical, and I introduced this, I have to admit, awkward term, para-object texts, which means that that objects do not necessarily need inscriptions, and in this specific case, epigrams on it to function. So it's always texts which are beyond, in most of the cases at least, beyond the object, beyond the matter on which they are inscribed. Okay, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for giving us all these ideas, all these insights, and what we can learn also from inscriptions to understand better inscriptions in books, so book epigrams, and also to give us this food for thought, so to say, about what beauty and what matter mean to these inscriptions, and what exactly is the relationship between matter and the texts that is inscribed on that matter. That was a very rich lecture, very fascinating, and I'm very sure there will be many reactions from the audience. Before we move on to that, once more, I want to encourage you to ask a question live. So, and this can be done by raising your hand in the chat box. There's that function in Zoom that you can use. If you don't feel, or for any other reason, if you want to write down your question, you can also do so in the chat box. Then I will read your question aloud for Andreas. And if you were wondering how, also I should mention that this lecture is being recorded, so and will be made available also after today for for the general public. Perhaps I should mention this as well. And if you were wondering who is responsible for all these practical things, setting up Zoom and taking care of the communication of this lecture, I should definitely mention that that we have a wonderful team of DBBEings doing all this stuff under the hood. So for this lecture, it's especially Anne-Sophie Roekhout and Raquel Riccieri, who are preparing also the practical setup of this lecture. I've seen that Raquel Riccieri is here, but that surprises me because I should say that only a few days ago she gave birth to a wonderful daughter. So let's also use this occasion to congratulate Raquel on this wonderful news. With all this talking, I just also wanted to break the ice for you and to let you think about possible questions and reactions. I don't know whether who wants to start. If there is no one, then I was of course also having questions, Andreas. Perhaps one of the questions that I had to do with the writing itself. I was wondering whether we can use the word calligraphy for the execution of the letters on the page, especially when it's done in Auszeichnungsmajuskel. I was wondering where do you see that in inscriptions or in book epigrams that this aspect is being foregrounded, so to say, when they talk about the beauty of the execution or the beauty of the object, that perhaps in some cases this also includes the beauty of the writing itself, or of the ink, or let's say the execution of the text in a graphical way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely, we can use the term of calligraphy too. And I just remind you of, there is the term for scribes, kalligraphos, or we also know the verb kalligrapheo. So the Byzantines, they were, of course, they were aware of the beauty of a text or the beauty of an illumination. So that's also an important aspect, which I perhaps did not mention very distinctly. I always spoke about Kosmos, and I included, let's say, the beauty, the kalos within this term. Yes. Mm.
Okay, thank you. Divna Manolova.
Hi, thank you, Andreas. It's so good to see all of you, actually. I'm very, very happy to see you, and I was very happy to hear what you had to say. Another question about beauty, I guess, but it's also about patterns and patterning. So have you noticed, or have you thought about how whenever a verse epigrams function as Kosmos, are there any patterns, rhythms, in terms of meter or even in terms of layout, something that contributes structures, etc., this adornment to this Kosmos?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for this question. Absolutely. If you recall the depiction of crosses in manuscripts and book epigrams, which are positioned on both sides, let's say, of the crossbar, there's always, very often we find the cross divides the two parts of the verse, the two parts of the dodecasyllable. And this is, of course, very intentional. So they, these verses find next to depictions or even illuminations, they are part of this, whole concept of illumination, because the text is not just written there, it is attached, let's say, to the image, to the depiction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Several other questions are coming up. We had first, I think, Julian Bertola, the member also of our DBBE team. Julian.
Hello. Thank you, Andreas. Hello. Thank you for this insightful and also very entertaining lecture, I must say. So my question, it's about metrical inscriptions. So, I was very triggered by your category of para-object texts, and I was thinking if a similar use of Kosmos and how Kosmos work in para-object texts, but which are not in meter. I mean, it's
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's you're absolutely right, because if this applies not only if you say para-object, that this does not only apply to epigrams, it also applies to every kind of inscriptions. Absolutely, if we think this concept to the end. Yeah. What was the second part of your question?
Yes. How does Kosmos work in this in non-metrical inscriptions? Do you have an idea about it?
Yeah, I mean, if you recall this inscription from Dongola, and we also have some rare examples from Byzantium, very long dedicatory inscriptions. They don't have to be there necessarily, but once they are there, they interact with the object and they are part of the object or part of a structure. Even if some of these inscriptions, prose inscriptions, are not legible, or perhaps they are positioned at places from where they just can be seen but not to be read, they are adornments. But it's not, of course, not only adornments of the Kosmos. They also have apotropaic meaning, they have protective meaning. If people look at it, they have the feeling that something important is written there, perhaps something divine is written there. So it is this, you see, this kind of inscriptions, they have so many meanings. Yeah, when human beings interact with them.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ida Toots also had a question. Ida?
Hi, hello. I want to say hello to everyone and to Andreas and to Floris as well. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to actually hear something I'm interested in and then to catch up with friends. So a question, there are many, of course, that can be asked, but the question that kind of struck me as perhaps interesting is the issue of repurposing of this material. So could you tell us something about how this material actually tends to be reused and whether there is anything by way of kind of regularities or habits that you can identify in this respect?
Yeah, thank you for these questions. Yeah, for this question. Yes, some of these epigrams which are found in manuscripts and on objects or on any structures, they are in many cases exchangeable because they use the same topoi. This is sometimes, it's kind of a common agreement, as it seems, yeah, this composition of the verses. They work with, let's say, parts of texts, and they just adjust some words or parts of verses. And once we find them here, once we find them there. But a crucial question is, did they have some guidelines how to compose these epigrams? And I think they had. There is nothing preserved from Byzantium, but if you think of the Painter's Guide of Dionysius of Furna, it mentions so many texts, so many inscriptions, metrical ones and prose ones, which should be inscribed next to the depictions of a saint or should be attached to the scroll. So I think that both scribes and also composers of epigrams for objects had this kind of guidelines, perhaps this guidebook at their hand.
Okay.
Did I get it, or is there, Ida, do you want to add something, or?
Yeah, of course. I mean, no, thank you very much. I was just wondering, because you mentioned Theodore of Studius, and we know that some of his epigrams tended to be reused in different inscriptional contexts, and in terms of monumental epigraphy. So are there any similar examples in your manuscripts?
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Klazina Stats. Klazina?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much
Hello.
for your lecture. I was wondering, given the double meaning of Kosmos, if there are also epigrams, book epigrams that are accompanied by pictures of the cosmos as a world. I was intrigued by this epigram, which was written in this perfect circle, and I was wondering, like, are there also epigrams connected to depictions of the world, the cosmos as a world?
The cosmos of, I didn't get the end. The cosmos of
the cosmos in the meaning of world, like. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I said. There's the cosmos in some epigrams. It plays with the meanings the word has. Very intentional.
Yeah, but I mean, are there also like visual depictions of the world in connection with these epigrams?
I don't recall any, but perhaps the BVE team knows some examples for that.
I cannot come up with any example, Klazina. I know that this would very much interest you, but I don't know of any, let's say, cartographical or geographical depictions that then would be accompanied by book epigrams. I don't have any knowledge of that.
Yeah, me neither. And when I worked on the 4th volume of the epigram series, and this 4th volume was dedicated to verses next to illuminations, next to depictions in manuscripts, I didn't come across anything like this.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, but it's interesting that this epigram, for example, is like squared in this perfect circle, which can at least be taken metonymically as some kind of reflection of the world. So that was perhaps
that was my thought. Exactly. Yeah.
That's a very good question. Yeah, very good thought. Absolutely.
Thanks.
There's also a question from Patrick Andrist.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation. I am since a long time very interested by the problematics bound to the concept of paratexts. And I must confess, a little bit puzzled. And for one thing, I'm not sure I understood your concept correctly. And on the other hand, I'm not sure I understand how it relates to broader paratext studies in the field of manuscripts. And maybe I can be a little bit more precise. I'm not sure if you, like in the last slide you showed with the conclusion, if the concept of paratext is for you separate from the para-object text, or if para-object text is another way, a better way, more precise way to describe what you want to say, for one thing. And then I thought, try to think, but it's time is trying to listen to you at the same time about para-object text, because there is, as you know, in the realm of book paratext, the questions about of if we should not name them para-content instead of paratexts, and the way the text is not what is commented but what comments. And now, how it came to para-object text rather than object paratexts, for example, for things. And my third point where I'm puzzled is when you say it's not, if I understand correctly, if it's not part of the production, if someone creates a book and write a text and an epigram at the same time, all of us, I mean, also so in the codicological field, would say it's part of the same production. The text, the main text, the Bible text, and the book epigram. But it seems that you make a distinction there that is a little, I would say, strange for me.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for these questions. And they are really very important questions, I think. So we'll start with the last one. Yes, of course. If we find book epigrams in manuscripts, they are part of the production of the manuscripts because they, in most of the cases, they were written by the scribe who wrote the manuscript. But on the other hand, we have manuscripts, or at least some manuscripts, where we don't find any paratexts, or perhaps even only a colophon at the end. And, yeah, but which means that these manuscripts do not necessarily need these metrical texts. That's what I meant. Yeah, I agree with you said para-object texts. Of course, we could also call them object paratexts. Yeah, perhaps this would even be a better term. Yeah, so thank you for this. And when I spoke about the concept of paratexts, I didn't make a distinction between metrical paratexts in manuscripts and metrical object paratexts, because as I said, these texts, these epigrams are exchangeable. And one time we find them in manuscripts, and then we find them with adaptations on objects, and the other way around. So there is this very close interaction, as I said, between the materials, and we must not distinguish between manuscripts and objects. And it's all the same, it's matter on which verses are inscribed. So we shouldn't make these distinctions between manuscripts, these very strict distinction between manuscripts and objects or other monuments, for example. Yeah. So that the flow goes in both ways, actually. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I don't know whether there are any other questions. I'm surveying the room now at this time, but actually we have already been listening and speaking for 1 hour. So I think that may be time to wrap up this inaugural lecture. And I'm of course very grateful to the audience, to the people who asked questions, but first and foremost to Andreas Rhoby for presenting us with this wonderful lecture and his ideas about these important things when for all of us who study epigrams or paratexts in a broad sense.
Yeah, it was a pleasure for me. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm also very thankful for the questions which came up. So this is very important for any further studies in this field. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that this first online lecture that it attained its goals, so to say, and I'm also very happy to invite you to the next lecture, which will be on March the 2nd. That's a Tuesday, but also at 4 p.m. Then we give the floor to a colleague of us of the DBE team, and we move on to a theme of linguistics. So Julie Boutin will talk about the focus in and on book epigrams, a pragmatic investigation of object-critic pronouns, and the topic focus pair in Byzantine book epigrams. So we are also very much looking forward to that lecture. And once again, I thank all of you for your attention.
Thank you. Goodbye. See you soon. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.